I'm going to hire somebody that makes me feel comfortable, but maybe isn't effective in sales. So that's number
Good
one.
insight, yeah.
Number two is the will to sell is different than the will to succeed.
Yes.
The drive to sell is different than drive.
It's specific, right?
And we can be deceived by that.
Welcome to the Value Factory Podcast, brought to you by One Accord. We're all about helping businesses thrive and grow through leadership, strategy, and meaningful impact. Now, whether you're a seasoned executive or just starting out, our goal is to provide insights and inspiration to help you navigate your journey. Thanks for tuning in.
All right, welcome everyone to the virtual edition of the Value Factory. I am joined by my friend and lookalike doppelganger, Dave Mantel. Dave's coming to us live from the Batcave.
From the Batcave.
We're going to talk all things sales today. So Dave is a sales professional and expert in sales, Acme Sales Development. I'm going to give a little background, Dave, on kind of how we're connected, and then we want to hear some story and actually get into you. How'd you say we got dressed up for this so you can dress me down? So I'll explain that in a minute. So Dave and I hang out together in a group called the International Executives Association. We're in a chapter local to the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. There's about 100 folks in this group that are owners of businesses or executives in businesses. And Dave and I met there, and he shared with me what he does. And he shared with me that he has a tool to gauge, these are my words, you'll say it differently, but a tool that'll tell me how good probability is that somebody will be a successful salesperson. And he offered to administer that tool. He let me take his test. And here's the story that I tell everybody. I'm actually not a good salesman, and I know it. But a lot of people think that I am. And yours is the first tool that actually uncovered the truth about my growing edge, my growth areas as a salesperson. And it was the most accurate test that I've taken. And so with that, I'm just pleased to get into conversation with you about what it takes to hire right, to manage right, lead right, to be successful in sales. And we'll go all over the place. Dave Mantel, good to have you here, man.
Thanks, Nick. I'm glad to be here. You're very tough on yourself in regard to the comment about not being able to sell. Oftentimes when I work with CEOs who are engaged with their sales team, and when they work with me, they typically are, they always want to kind of test the test. I explain to them that evaluation is an initial part of what we're going to do. And they invariably, they want to see what this thing is for themselves. Either they fancy themselves as good salespeople. Most people that are CEOs have been involved in sales some way or another. And so they want to test this thing. And I got to warn them, that, for CEOs of companies, they rely on such different skills. They may have had them in the past or had to use them. What shows up on this assessment isn't always complimentary. And I like to say to them that, as a CEO, if you're out there selling or performing some sort of a public facing role for your company, you don't have to be as good a salesperson as your salespeople do. They don't have the same advantages that you do out in the public space, right? And so invariably, those assessments are not they're not going to rise to the level that you would require for any specific salesperson that you would want to hire. So that's I think that's probably something like what I told you when you.
So that the results of the assessment may not be complimentary, but you sure are. You're a nice guy. How long have you been in the business of developing salespeople, Dave?
Oh gosh, I think it started with a role that I sort of fell into for a commercial printing company.
Mm-hmm.
Lost our manager. I was the best salesperson there, or the highest volume, and so they said, "Congratulations, you're the sales manager." And so over a period of time, I had some external factors happen in the printing business that made me think, gosh, I need to take a look at the development of my people. And over the years, I had been involved with a sales coach. who trained me, coached me. I go back to him from time to time, and I called him and I said, there's some stuff going on. I think I need to send my people to training. And his question kind of caught me off guard. It was, are they trainable? And I said, well, what are you talking about? And he said,
Yeah.
well, don't burn your money on training if they're not trained. Let's test them first.
Well, let me ask you,
Yeah.
what makes someone trainable? I'd say in sales, but I'll bet the answer is more than just sales.
Well, what I found out, it's a combination, I think, of what are the requirements for the position, right? Do they have a strong will to sell, which I'll show you when we put your damage up here on the screen. What are their tactical competencies?
Mm-hmm.
Assuming we agree that these competencies are the most important. And then what are the things that would stand in the way or enhance the execution of those tactical skills that they have?
A strong will to sell.
Strong will to sell.
And you alluded to the results of my assessment.
Yeah.
How would you define a strong will to sell?
A specific passion for further success in selling. And that's where, you'd mentioned earlier, it was the better of other assessments that you've taken. Other assessments, they might call this, we call it desire. We might describe it as drive in another assessment, but that could mean general drive, right? You have a drive and a passion to grow your organization. That's different than a specific desire.
That is where I would say I can confuse other people.
Mm-hmm.
I'm very driven.
Yeah.
That doesn't necessarily mean that I have a strong will to sell.
Right. Because
So if I meet somebody and I'm interviewing them, is it possible for me to see that in a line of interview questions? How do I know if somebody's got a strong will to sell being different than just being driven?
they will, I suppose if you ask them the right questions about what motivates them, what does drive them, what is the passion that they have inside of them for success, you might be able to figure out. However, we'd like you to figure that out before you meet them and spend your time with them, right?
Oh, yeah. So that's the whole purpose of the assessment. Is I can say to somebody, if I'm hiring for a sales position, there's 7 applicants.
Mm-hmm.
Have them go through the assessment, and I filtered that out. It's interesting. I think as a hiring manager and I don't know that I've ever been directly a sales manager, but I've been responsible for P&L, which means I'm responsible for people. And the story I would tell myself, like the justification I would give, is if someone is driven, then they can be driven in sales. But I think we're finding that isn't necessarily true.
And you see hiring managers that they'll lean toward specific, subjective, familiar attributes, like somebody is former military,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they see that as very strong quality to have in somebody that they hire. You see legacy hires, somebody that's got a renowned last name, right? Or they come from a specific industry, right? Industry experience is one of those things that we're looking for. Gosh, unless you're selling, nuclear technology, or you need some sort of a security clearance, I'm not sure that industry experience is always the be all end all. So
Yeah.
point being, we see these subjective things that cause us to kind of, for lack of a better term, fall in love with our candidates.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah.
And in the interview situation, it's a real struggle to try to attain objective information in a subjective setting. Right.
I've said it I heard it and now I say it often. The mind justifies what the heart desires. So if I meet someone and I like them and they're personable and they're outgoing and they seem like they're driven, then I can start justifying, oh, well, this person's going to make a good salesperson. Here's a different line of question for you. And then I want to go into the assessment. That's going to be fun. Is it possible for someone who doesn't like sales and doesn't like salespeople to hire effectively for a salesperson?
Without a tool?
Yes.
I think if they have, yes, if they have help, if
I'm
they have
yeah,
something that offsets their implicit bias.
I'm so with you. And this is just it's kind of a revelation through this conversation. I hope that people that are listening have tracked with it so far. For a person to be successful in sales, we are in agreement, you and I are, that they have to have a strong will to sell,
Correct.
which is different than being strong-willed and driven. They have to be driven for sales. And then I'm just thinking of my own self, like I can imagine saying, well, nobody likes to be sold to.
Correct.
Well, if that's the case, is it even possible for me to want to hire somebody who has a strong will to sell? Or have I already turned myself off of this person thinking that they are all of the cliche things, the dirty car salesman, let's say,
Right.
when in
Again,
fact,
I think your bias would play into that because are you already sold when they walk in the door? Right. You've looked at their resume, you see them walk through the door, they look nice, smell nice. You might be highly impressed. Love at first sight, right? That's gonna affect how you feel about whether you're being sold to or not, no matter what they say. Right. And so what happens is that interview becomes, let me tell you about my company and how great we are. Won't you please come to work for us?
hmm,
That becomes so often the extent of the interview, right? And rather than allowing that candidate to sell to you the way that they'd sell to a prospect, right? You're basically
reminded
trying
of
to
the old
convince them to come to work for you and telling them how great you're coming, and you're basically delivering a marketing message to them.
in the opposite way, the wrong way. I'm reminded of that. Sell me this pen, Dave.
Yeah, yeah.
And as I don't know, old and cliche, and maybe okay, boomer. It's what we might hear in response to that. That is actually a part of what needs to occur in the sales interview. Is I need to know if this candidate can actually has a will to sell.
Well, can I ask you? Can I be the interviewer for just a second?
Oh yeah.
What are the? I mean, do you have memorable best or worst experiences about hiring salespeople?
How about this? I think I know what you're asking, but I want to reframe it to make sure. I've hired salespeople, and let's just say out of 10, more than 10, but out of 10, less than half of the salespeople that I have hired through the entirety of my career have been top sales professionals.
Not unusual.
And maybe less than three, so 2 out of 10,
Hmm.
I don't know, maybe 1 or 2 out of 10 have actually been unable to perform, but the bulk, so 6 out of 10, somewhere in that range, have been good enough or good or very good. So if I've hired 10 people in sales, a few have been excellent, most have been good, and 1 or 2 have been missed the mark.
Can you share? Can you pick up that that I just sold you?
Mm-hmm.
Can you share with other CEOs and hiring managers over that period of time? Do you have any idea what the cost of that was when those salespeople didn't work out?
Yeah, here's just a real life example of a person hired into salesperson hired,
Hmm.
3 years of sales performance, 3 years of contribution that you couldn't draw a straight line to revenue that covered 3 years of salary. Ballpark, $100,000 a year, all in, right? So maybe a $80,000 base plus markup, right? You got taxes and so forth. So you got $300,000. Can't draw a straight line to 300,000 in gross revenues.
Hmm.
Not to mention that there's the expense of deliveries. A salesperson, I would, in today I just do things differently. A lot in thanks in large part to what you and I have been talking through for a while now. If I'm going to hire a salesperson at $100,000, I need to first understand what the gross margin is of the product or service that they're selling. So if they sell something that's $100,000 price tag, I don't make 100. It might cost me 60,000 to deliver that thing. So the gross margin off of that first sale is only $40,000. So I need to look at some multiple of the salesperson's compensation, and generally it's like 10x. That's a fair place to start.
Mm-hmm.
So if I hire somebody at $100,000, I need them to generate $1 million in revenue per year. Then I have to account for the fact that it's going to take, and in my business, 3 months to even get a prospective client to sign an engagement that's going to then start paying. 6 months probably. Long sales cycle in my business. So I've got a 1-year investment in this person that needs to be recouped in the second year.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Dave, I'd love to hire you as a salesperson. I'll pay you $100,000 a year, but you need to generate $2 million in revenue in your second year just to pay for yourself. And if they don't have capacity, if they don't have competence, if we don't do a good job of bringing them in and then they quit after a year, that math starts to add up.
Yeah, and the ramp up of whoever you would replace them.
Right. And that doesn't even take into consideration the opportunity cost and the loss. So
right.
as I say all of this for the last 3 minutes, it is no wonder that founders, executives, owners of small businesses don't want to hire salespeople.
Yeah, and if including that lost opportunity for that person who would have ramped up, you're talking about the difference of, I would say, I don't think $5 million is out of the question, right? For that one, right? Because
yes,
and it's been that for a long time. It's
it
not
just
like
is.
this isn't a number that just came up this year, right?
No. So you hire right and you take advantage of the economic opportunity. Hire right, and it's a $5 million economic opportunity over time. Like 3 years' time in my business, that is absolutely realistic. Hire wrong, and not only do you not get the 5 million in revenue, but it costs upwards of 300,000. So I can take away the 40% gross margin on the 5 million. So let's call that 2 million. In addition to the 300,000 spent, an improper hire has a cost of $2.5 million in real dollars.
Yeah, and in a meeting with a CEO about this, my question is typically, is that a lot of money in your business? Right. And you'll get all kinds of reactions to that, but mostly, yeah, when you start to think about what an individual decision like that is what's at stake for that choice, I think, it's easy to see that all of us could do it better, and there's not many people, I don't think, I've got an association of colleagues who do this, but I don't find too many other people that can come to a CEO and say, I can help you hire better salespeople. You can do better.
Right. And I would say, so, I'm as candid and transparent as they are, and I'm that guy, right? I'm the guy that you want to be selling to. And I say, yeah, I don't believe it. How do you do that? Like, so let's get into the assessment. Let's prove it.
That was a rhetorical question or not?
Yeah. Because
So,
after I took the assessment, I became a believer, man.
a little bit of framing. I took you back to that story about, are they trainable?
Mm-hmm.
And so rather than take my money for training, what this fella did is he ran my part of the organization through what we now call a sales effectiveness and improvement analysis. It's a Salesforce evaluation, top to bottom, right? Where you would, if you're working with a CEO, you're measuring their forward-looking vision and strategy, right? Then just below that, you're measuring the sales management component of that organization. Are they on board with where are they, and where do we find inconsistent strategy, right? Where can we create cohesion out of confusion, right? Then when we evaluate that management component for whatever skill, whatever will to manage, whatever DNA stuff might come up in there, and then that's going to give us their ability to execute, right? Now, with the sales team at that level, evaluating that team is going to tell us what kind of team that we have, right? Based on here's where I want to go. What's the gap between where my team is right now and where I want to go, right? And that will tell us also the effectiveness of that management component. What sort of impact is that management component having on that sales force, right? So all that comes together as a best practice. If you're ever going to hire salespeople, do that first. It's the best investment you can make. I'm convinced
Amen.
of it. Fortunately, for a guy like me, and the development work that I do, I can predict growth. I can tell you where it's going to happen. I can give you the roadmap to grow this team either with or without my help. So there's where you start. And as you look forward to hiring, right, based on what these salespeople need to do in their various roles, we can create the profile based on that forward looking vision, right? And make sure that when we're sitting down to interview sales candidates, they would be recommended based on a combination of that criteria and the criteria of the assessment itself at whatever difficulty level that position happens to be, right? You've got entry level all the way up to, boardroom sales and luxury items and things like that. So with that, let's say we've done all that and we're going to hire salespeople. We know who to hire, who not to hire. And then we move into, let's see if I can share the right screen here. The findings of the assessment itself. It's a good time that I mentioned the organization that I work with is called the Objective Management Group. A form of this assessment has been around since, I think, 1989. In all my years of doing this, I think playing this role right now has been, I think 2002 is when I started. I can't find anything better. I can't find anything that even comes close. Essentially, it starts with what are the 21 core competencies of sales.
So I'm looking at the screen now and I'm thinking, I don't know how small it's going to show up on anybody's. So let's keep it really high level.
Mm-hmm.
I'd love to go into all the 21, but I don't think we have time in this
Well, we can use
conversation. But
we can pick a couple as examples, right? But we're going to break this down into, think of a three-legged stool, right? Will to sell. And what we're trying to answer is the question of, will this candidate sell, right? Now we'll disclose this now. This is your assessment, Nick. Okay. So will to sell means desire, committed. We talked about desire. Will this individual do what it takes? Even when it gets hard, will they make changes? Right?
mm-hmm.
If somebody comes to you with these two components, that's probably a trainable, fairly coachable person. They have built-in incentive already, right? And we look at things like outlook, responsibility. How are they motivated? To what degree?
So my will to sell is a score of 76 and a target is 60.
Correct.
So that means that
The target in this case would have been the position I selected to evaluate you for.
Got it.
That make sense?
Yep.
Okay. So staying high level here. I'm going to move over to the third one first here. If I can get this thing to move. There we go. Tactical. These are what the assessment measures as the tactical sales competencies, and you'll notice that they follow the sales process chronologically.
Mm-hmm.
This might be a good time to say these are the competencies. We could probably have a debate about whether these are the most important ones, but the science of testing is developed to where you can find out what you want to find out. So typically we just have to agree that these are the right things.
Well, what's emerging for anybody that could see this on screen is that the will to sell is seemingly high. The tactical ability to sell is below target, low.
Mm-hmm.
And what I can say to validate this is that this is just true. And in all of those tactics, relationship building seems to score high. Sales process and technology seems to score high. My entire sales career has been relational. And I have been successful in selling really only because I'm outgoing, personable, likable, and then I can ask for some business and close some sales. But I rely on that like one arrow in the quiver, that one tool in the bag. And the rest of these sales tactics, I just know internally that I don't, those are not sharpened tools
Yeah.
in the bag.
And you sold for large companies, correct?
Yeah, actually, really good point.
Yeah. And so if you were the expert, that challenger salesperson, right? The person that's handling the relationship building, you're handling, and from there forward, there wouldn't be much hunting, wouldn't be much reaching decision makers because somebody else might do that for you, right? Um, and so, yeah, to your point, what I find is when I talk to salespeople and I ask them about their history, what I'll find is the high scores are the tactical competencies that they've been leaning on most. It's the biggest part of their job, so they tend to develop those. But when we're looking for producing salespeople, man, they want hunters.
That's right.
Man, they want consultative sellers.
Not only was I working for a big company, but it was banking, it was financial services, so it was highly commoditized.
Right.
So I wasn't selling a unique product or a unique service. I was selling the same thing as every other banker in town. The differentiation was me. It was the relationship with the banker. And so I was taught to sell that way. I started my banking career when I was 17. So formative years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Is it possible to learn sales tactics?
Yes.
So this part is coachable.
This part is trainable.
Trainable, thank you, not coachable, trainable.
This is like, okay, so you hire me as your sales development guy, right? This is the stuff that I'm a smart guy. I've developed a program. This is the stuff that I think I can teach you,
Yep,
right? And your people. Right?
cool.
It's knowledge transferred from one person to another. Okay. Really good point, because now that can segue into the sales DNA right here on the top left. That's the stuff that either enhances or inhibits someone's ability to execute. It's not
And
that they don't know it.
yeah,
It's a particular strength that they would have or not have to execute.
so this is the part that the former me would have struggled with so much because it's incredibly vulnerable. I mean, just look at the first words on here say doesn't need approval.
Mm-hmm.
And for me to say, if I was the younger me,
Mm-hmm.
the totally arrogant, egotistical, cocky younger me, to say something like I am an approval seeker, right? That would have sounded like a statement of weakness.
Well, yeah, and you want to be kind of careful with that too. And this is a good time to remember that the measurements here, this doesn't mean that you need approval in your whole life. This is specific to sales and selling.
But the truth is, I do want approval in my whole life. And I could totally unpack my childhood psychology of my dad leaving the house when I was 4 and he ended his life when I was 10. And I had this lifelong, question of why am I not good enough? And, I carry around daddy issues as an adult. And that plays out in all of my relationships, including sales, right? I'll show up to sell. And if I'm rejected by a prospect,
Mm-hmm.
it hurts on an emotional level.
Right. Now the question would be how. So if that's the case, that's why I have a black background sitting by the fireplace with the light shining on me.
This is the go deep emotional men's weekend stuff that helped me break free from all those chains of bondage. But listen, I'm just being real.
You
I'm
get the
being real.
podcast host crying and you've had a good day.
This is
But
this is the real stuff. So on the, if I say that that's the shadow side of a personality, the light side is that if you look over on the drive and the will, like second place is the first loser. I have to win. I have to win approval. I'm competitive. I want to go after it. But my yardstick is more about, did I win someone's approval than did I win the sale?
yeah, and in a sales context, what this means is, again, if you sell at high levels, I think that it's probably true that if the seller is not challenging the prospect's way of thinking,
Mm-hmm.
they probably don't belong in the room. And
Right.
in order to do that, you have to be able to ask difficult questions without worry about whether you're going to upset that individual, right? And the need for approval will affect that more than any single thing.
And that scares me to death, challenging a prospective client.
Yeah, but yeah, but there again, in the position you are in your organization,
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to run into that as much as a salesperson will, right? Because
Fair statement. Fair statement.
yeah,
Yeah.
because you're going to be in more of a business discussion with someone than you know the power difference isn't going to be set the same way it is with the CEO and a salesperson.
Yeah. So if the will to sell is that innate stuff, maybe the tactical can be taught. Are these things coachable?
Yeah, and again, good good segue into what I would talk about. If this is the stuff that you teach, this is the stuff that get coached, right? Because when you work with salespeople, what you'll find is their inability to execute something they already know, right? Is going to be the same thing for the same person over and over and over again, right? And this is represents the friction to the learning,
Mm.
right? To the degree of which someone is strong in these areas affects the ramp up time in a positive way. Right? It doesn't take as long to train and to ramp up a
Yeah.
salesperson who is strong in these areas, no matter what they happen to know
And
in their technical.
the areas of strength would be approval, staying in the moment, supportive beliefs, supportive bicycle. I don't know if we have time to unpack all those, but comfortable discussing money and handling rejection. So thanks for sharing that.
My pleasure.
Yeah.
I'll
I
talk about
think,
this stuff all day if you let me.
well, I could too, but I don't think we could carry on I'm not Joe Rogan or Lex Friedman, so I don't know we can go 3 hours in a podcast. I think at a high level, if there's a if there are a few takeaways from this conversation, number one, it is the hiring manager. And really, if we're talking to owners and entrepreneurs and CEOs, these are not necessarily multi-billion-dollar companies with a robust sales team. Actually, a lot of our clients will hire us to come in and lead their sales organizations as a VP of sales or chief revenue officer. And I'm happy to say that that's not me. I'm not that person. As we can see from the results of this assessment, I'd have to work a lot to get there. But we do have people on our team that this is what they would score very high on the assessments. Nevertheless, the owner that wants to hire a salesperson really has to be self-aware and understand their own perspectives and beliefs on sales. So I would suggest, this is an actual endorsement, unpaid by the way, but you can take me to lunch later. Every CEO, every owner of a company ought to take this assessment for themselves, if for nothing else than to understand how they make decisions about hiring salespeople.
Right. You hire to your own weakness for sure.
Right. So if I'm the type of person that says, well, nobody likes to be sold to, am I going to hire an actual salesperson? Probably not.
Probably not.
I'm going to hire somebody that makes me feel comfortable, but maybe isn't effective in sales. So that's number
Good
one.
insight. Yeah.
Number two is the will to sell is different than the will to succeed. The
Yes.
drive to sell is different than drive.
It's
And
specific, right?
we can be deceived by that.
Yeah.
I have deceived people with that. Oh, you must be a really good salesperson.
I think you could look back to comparative assessments that you've participated in and all the ones that said, hey, as soon as you get a chance, put this guy in sales, right?
Oh yeah, all of them. Myers-Briggs, StrengthsFinder, Kolbe assessments, they would all point to, I should be in sales.
Yeah, and my general belief is all great assessments used for the wrong purpose.
Yep.
Right.
Yeah. Really good. Really good. And so then we've got this kind of innate will to sell. Then tactics, which can be taught. And what was the third one?
Sales
The middle
DNA.
sales DNA.
Yeah, inherent.
Which,
They're the best way I can describe it is the stuff that, or it could be mindset, it could be, inherent mindset, but it's the stuff that supports or stands in the way of execution.
so this is what we can coach to. So if we've got the person with the will to sell, we can teach them tactics and we can coach them around mindset.
Yeah, I think of people like Daryl Strawberry, all the talent you'd ever imagine, but just had stuff standing in his way that kept him from being as amazing as amazing. He just had stuff standing in the way of his potential. And it had nothing to do with tactical competency. I don't know why he popped into my head all of a sudden, but
Well, who doesn't love a early 90s baseball reference?
yeah, I guess.
Good. Good. All right, Dave. So how do people get in touch with you if they want to learn more?
Well, they can reach me probably through you, but you can, my email is probably always a good way. My website is acmesalesdevelopment.com, spelled out, or excuse me, not spelled out, Acme Sales Dev.com. You can reach me there. You can reach me by telephone at 206-952.
I love that.
I may not answer, but I'll listen to the message and I'll call you right back. And email is dave@acmesalesdev.com.
Awesome. Well, Dave, I appreciate you sharing my results here with the whole world to see. But really, the intention of the Value Factory podcast, the whole point of us having this conversation live for the world to consume, is that owners of companies can learn something that will help them get better. And I think that hiring effectively is supremely important and often, if not mostly, done wrong.
Yeah, and I think starting with taking the keys to the sales department, turn it over to somebody and expecting it just to drive down the road the way you want it to. Take charge of your sales team, take responsibility for it
Mm-hmm.
as the person who will be ultimately held responsible for it, and find out, in pursuit of where I want to go, do I have the team that can get me there? If not, what's it going to take to get there? I think it's the most value that it's the most value that you can deliver short term, that everybody walks away with. The ROI is instant. It's not like training and development, which takes 9 to 12 months.
Mm-hmm.
It's right now, you can know. And this is stuff that, God, it would take 4 or 5 years to find out if you knew what you were looking for anybody in that organization. So that's my pitch for that. It's just a great exercise to start, great starting place.
Awesome. Well, thanks for spending some time with us, Dave.
My
Look
pleasure.
forward to seeing you
See you
again.
again. Okay, Nick, thanks.
You got it.
Bye now.